Wow, this is going to be a crazy story. It's going to be a local story about a shootout and a bank robbery. Now, you might be asking yourself, why are we talking about such a localized story in South Carolina? Well, we're going to be talking about this story because specifically this bank robbery and shootout was committed by a former police chief who... This was actually not the first time he robbed a bank, as we got this headline from the Free Thought Project that does very critical reporting of police. They actually do some really good work out there. And their headline here is, Police Chief Who Wasn't Jailed for Robbing Bank Just Robbed Another Bank and Got Shot. The byline reading, after robbing a bank less than 2 years ago, this former police chief was sentenced only to probation, which has allowed him to rob yet another bank. Now, Jason, this is a crazy story that highlights so many bigger issues, not just with police accountability, but by and large, the corruption and just false trust that individuals give to other authority figures that are time and time let down. Because, again, people are imperfect, but there has to be something said about what people are calling a systemic problem around police accountability. What's your take on it? Because, Jason, man, this story's nuts. This story's crazy.
Well, let's start off with the facts. The man looks a lot worse for the wear after that first bank robbery attempt. If you look over here, his first attempt, now remember, this isn't just a police officer. This was the chief of police. That means he ran a department, folks. Let's get that out of the way, okay? Not a rookie cop.
He was promoted. He was promoted by other officers and the government saying, you're doing the best job out of everyone here. You deserve to have the highest salary, the most amount of responsibility here. This is the guy that was picked by this department. Just to clue that in here. Keep going, Jason.
So then he gets caught. He gets convicted. He works out a deal where he does probation. You know who gets probation for robbing a bank? Nobody. Nobody gets that. It doesn't happen. Yeah. It's imagination land. It really.
Let's give some details here, Jason. Let's give some details here because I think it's important. Because this first bank robbery happened in 2017.
Yep.
And then he was the former police chief, and he walked into a bank in South Carolina with a gun, handed a teller a note, and then walked out of the bank with a stack of cash. Of course, he was arrested. Of course, he was found guilty. But yet again, he was supposed to be facing 10 to 30 years in jail.
As he should.
No
the armed robbery.
Probation.
Armed robbery in a bank.
What Free Thought Project calls blue privilege and a slap on the wrist, which obviously total slap on the wrist here. Keep going with the details here, Jason.
So then, we're talking, less than 2 years later, he's at it again. And this time, he doesn't only rob the bank, Luke. He decides to get into a high-speed chase with other officers. Remember, this is a man in law enforcement. This is a man who directed people, who had to go after criminals, and gets out in a shootout with them where he's wounded and shot during the chase. You can't make this stuff up. But the bigger aspect of this is, Luke, cops are people. They can easily become corrupt, as you can see in this story. And let's be honest, it's not an isolated incident. We were talking earlier this month, this is March 7th, that this
wait, hold on. I just want to, before we get into the second one, I mean, I'm just, this needs a little bit, I can't stop thinking about this now. I mean, the before and after pictures just pretty much say everything with the 2 year span. But this man, as the Free Thought Project states, apparently was on a mission to get away as he tried to escape and was shot. Again, he did the same thing, handed the teller a note, took off in a van, had a gun on him. He had an undisclosed amount of cash. And this is absolutely pretty crazy. Armed, dangerous robbery. He obviously is facing, again, 10 to 30 years in prison. Now he violated his probation. Man, let's hope. I mean, this story needs a lot of eyes and ears because not a lot of people are putting the connection here. This should be national news, Jason.
Luke, well, it's starting to make its rounds. Luke violated his probation. No, he didn't just violate his probation. He committed armed robbery again. And this time, he led the police on an actual chase, which he didn't do the first time. And it would appear to me, police don't usually take their weapons out and shoot at you until you shoot at them. It does have. Sometimes they try to shoot at tires and things like that, but there's body cams, dash cams. I would be shocked if the cops shot at him first. Maybe they did. Yeah. But think about that.
He was an officer for 25 years.
Yes.
25 years. And obviously, we can't trust the police officers here. We can't trust any accountability here because there hasn't been any. So the initial police reports here, I'm putting in question and in doubt, which everyone should, because, again, as we're seeing, there's no accountability of any legal repercussions living through a totally separate justice system, which shouldn't be called justice, should be called a privileged system. It's absolutely just insane. But this is nothing new. People need to understand. This is shocking as we're reading the story, but stories like this, they're nothing new, right, Jason?
Nope, they aren't. I mean, take a look at this one. Again, earlier in the March, you see this officer here, Bronx police officer, running a drug trafficking operation. Dealing the H. No big deal. Oh, that's an isolated incident. Is it? Because in September, we had 7 New York police officers arrested in prostitution and a gambling investigation. Let's go to that first news clip. Again, this didn't make national news. This was very, very localized, okay? So here it is, but let's hear what she has to say. Well, this couldn't have been a big deal, right?
Several members of the NYPD are under arrest and in custody, accused of taking part in a gambling prostitution ring. And investigators say this was no small operation.
Oh, it wasn't small.
Ravietta is in Canarsie, Brooklyn tonight with the details that are still unraveling at this hour, Ray.
Natalie, they'll be unraveling for quite some time when those suspects go before a judge tomorrow. Instead of doing the arresting, several officers, several members of the NYPD are under arrest, accused of helping to protect the gambling and prostitution ring in Brooklyn and Queens.
An investigation across the city and across the New York City Police Department started in 2015 after a tip from a fellow officer. Now the fallout. 3 sergeants, 2 detectives, and 2 police officers are accused of helping
sergeants and
prostitution
detectives
and gambling ring instead of breaking it up. An NYPD spokesman tells us some cops used NYPD computers to get information and tip off suspects about investigations underway to help them avoid getting arrested.
But let's stop it there, Lucas. This actually expands to the fact that the people running it were the ex-vice detective and his wife. So they weren't just helping. Yeah. They weren't just involved in covering up. No, an ex-vice detective and his wife were running the ring. And they were they had workers who were police officers. That's what this was.
And Jason, this story should be national news. All of this should be talked about in a larger aspect of accountability, since police officers many times fail to be held accountable for their actions. Even growing up in Brooklyn, in South Brooklyn specifically as a teenager, I was attacked many times for racial reasons by police officers. I even knew of crooked cops and police officers that you couldn't do anything about. There's one specific officer in South Brooklyn that was literally not only stealing drugs from drug dealers and reselling them or reusing them, but raping women. Literally, not only sexual assaulting, but specifically, number of women were raped by this one specific police officer, and people couldn't do anything about it. This was way before everyone had smartphones with video cameras. This is when people still had flip phones and couldn't really do anything. There was a feeling of, holy cow, these guys are the original gangsters, and we need to understand, not all officers are bad, but you have to treat officers just like you would any random human being, because you never know what you're going to get. And statistically, with the amount of trauma that police officers usually receive from their job, they are a lot more susceptible to a lot of those worser actions when it comes to spousal abuse, when it comes to cheating on a loved one. They are more likely, statistically, to commit those acts because of the trauma and the hardships of their job, which is legitimately very, very difficult to deal with, especially when you're dealing with the worst aspects of society day in and day out. That will have a psychological effect. And when you're seeing someone in a badge, I'm seeing just people blindly support them and love them. No. You should treat that human being just as a other human being. and be more skeptical of them than ever before. That is something that, of course, is very important to bring up. Now, the Free Thought Project does that in many different ways. I'm just seeing some of their headlines here. Absolutely incredulous. I mean, we could get into so many different stories. I'm hearing one story here. Cop gets 20 years for having sex with fellow cop as their child died in a hot patrol car. School cop whose job was to protect children arrested for raping children. I mean, and it just goes on and on. 6 cops around men sleeping in Taco Bell, execute them again. There's a lot to bring up here. There's a lot to unravel here. But again, accountability is one of them. Not just judging people is another big aspect of it. But being skeptical, I think, is extremely, extremely important. And highlighting these stories and getting these stories out there so we could actually have some accountability. So, you know, Jason, we don't have more bank robberies committed by bank robbers, and the actual bad people in our society are actually held accountable and not let go because of just the corruption that is in the system and is in any systems. And that's why I'm kind of more leaning towards an anarchistic philosophy, more of a self-responsibility aspect, and don't believe anyone should have any authority over me, because that authority will, of course, be abused like it always has been throughout human recorded history. That's my take on it. What about you, Jason?
Well, again, I think that we have to go on an individual basis. One of the reasons I could never really get behind the Black Lives Matter movement is because it was about race in a lot of ways and not just about police brutality. I think police brutality is a real issue. Sometimes it is racially motivated, but I don't think the two are hand in hand, and they shouldn't be treated as such.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they should not
Totally
be treated as such. I think that we have to get in there and expose, and we have to punish police corruption. What we don't do is we don't allow a former police chief who commits armed robbery in a bank to get probation for something he was charged 10 to 30 years for, because what did it result in? Another robbed bank, and this time him being shot in a police chase. You know, think about somebody who was innocent that could have been killed or injured in that same incident. So, again, people are people. We judge them by their character. We judge them by their actions. In any profession, you're going to have good apples, bad apples, and people in between. And unfortunately, in the law enforcement industry, it can cost lives. So we have to be extra careful with that and have extra scrutiny on it.
I totally 100% agree. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. Remember, we're doing 4 videos a day now, 3 on the main, 3 on the backup, 1 on the main. Subscribe, stay tuned. Maybe if you click the notification button, maybe you'll get some of the videos. Maybe you won't. But again, that's kind of the name of the game now. But if you like this reporting, don't forget to support us on wearechange.org/donate. Without you, we would not be here. Once again, love you guys. Stay tuned for more here on wearechange.org.